Hi, I'm James Caranta from RC Chief Hobbies, and today I'd like to talk to you about how to tune the ProBoat Miss Geico 29-inch catamaran so it can run its absolute best. These instructions are also applicable for the Blackjack 29 as well. Now, the Miss Geico and the Blackjack are probably my two favorite ready-to-run catamarans out there, and that's because when they're set up correctly, they are fast and stable and frankly look great on the water. My son races the Miss Geico and the P Limited offshore and really has a blast with it. Now, the ready-to-run catamarans sometimes can have a problem, especially with this particular design, and it has to do with how they're manufactured. When they come out of the manufacturing plant, the sponsons are not perfectly flat, and that can cause a variety of problems. One of them is, on these particular designs, it can cause the boat to oscillate. And what's happening is the bottom sponsons are kind of, because of the concavity, they kind of stick to the water a little bit, and they don't let the boat kind of air out completely. And what some people try to do to compensate for that is they think if they move the batteries forward, that'll keep the nose down and eliminate the porpoising, when in fact that just makes the problem worse. And that's because the air is coming in under the boat, the boat's not airing out properly, and the air pressure pushes that nose up. So with the batteries forward, you get a rapid oscillation. When you move the batteries back, you get a more gentle oscillation. But that's still a problem, because if the nose is oscillating up, and if you hit a wake at the wrong time or there's a gust of air, the boat can easily blow over. What you want to have is the boat, when it's under full power, to kind of air out, the nose comes up, the back lifts up a little bit, the air comes through, and it should just run like this, fast and stable without any bouncing. Okay, so the first modification, which probably doesn't help all that much with the bouncing, but it does make the boat run better and more stable in the water, and it does eliminate one of the variables, which is lift from the rudder, and that is to basically smooth out the angles on the rudder. Basically, I just take a bastard file and basically just round those sharp edges along the sides, file those down, and then I also round the front a little bit as well. And what you'll get is a rudder that looks like this. So these are rounded along the bottom, and then a little bit rounded here. And then I also like to sharpen it up a little bit. So that makes a nice rudder. You should do that really for any boat. Okay, the next modification goes a long way to minimizing the bounce. First, you have to understand where you want to set up your strut on a catamaran. So if you put the catamaran on a flat surface, you'll see that it can sit, the sponsons are both sitting on the flat surface. And I like to adjust my, strut so that it is just maybe 1/8 of an inch off of the bottom. I found that to be a really good position for this boat as well as for the Blackjack. Now the problem is, if you try just to lift this strut without making the modification I'm going to review, there's a slot in here, and as you lift the strut, this angle, this strut will start to point up a little bit, which is called positive thrust angle. And when that happens, that will tend to want to lift the nose of the boat when it's running. So what we need to do is modify the slot on the strut support so that when we lift it up, it's not pointed up, we can keep it flat. So we need a little bit of room in here so that we can pull it back and keep it completely flat when we lift it up. That really helps with the bounce. You'll still see a little bit though, and depending on the hull, some are worse than others. But this is really a must-do to make sure that you've got this particular strut flat. You don't want any angle on this at all. Alright, so this boat's already been modified, but I'll show you what I did. If you loosen up the strut here. By the way, I did say that you'd want to run it completely flat, and if you blueprint the sponsons, you do. If you don't blueprint the sponsons, you can actually add a slight negative angle, which helps push the nose down a little bit. So when I run this without blueprinting, I actually have just a tad, and I mean just a tad, of negative angle, not too much at all. But flat to slightly negative is optimal. So let's pull this guy out. So here's the modification. What I've done is I've taken a rat tail file and I have simply filed out a little extra room right in here, which enables me to adjust the strut forward and backwards as it's raising, as it rises up and down. That will go a long way to minimizing the bounce on these boats. All right, so let's talk about blueprinting. Blueprinting seems intimidating the first time that you do it, but it's actually a pretty simple and straightforward process. Tools are pretty minimal. I like to use a drywall sander. You want something that is long and flat. I use 80 grit paper to sand down, initially sand down and strip off the initial material. I like to use this marine epoxy putty. It's kind of pricey, but it is very durable. It is a marine epoxy repair. I pick it up at West Coast Marine. It sets up in the consistency of putty, kind of like Bondo, which is the perfect consistency. And then it just, when it dries, it is super strong, super durable, and it's waterproof. Some people like to use just Bondo, but Bondo is not really water impermeable, and if you don't seal it up or repaint it, water can get into that Bondo and it can flake off. With this repair, if you don't even have to repaint the boat if you don't want to. In fact, I don't even bother. I just do the sponsons and I just leave this bare. It works great. Okay, so the first step is sanding. Again, using your sanding block, drywall sander, 80 grit paper. And basically what you want to do, let me do this one over here so you can maybe see it better. You just want to sand nice, even strokes. And what you're trying to do is sand off the paint just enough so that you can see where the high and the low spots are. Now, if you make any mistakes sanding, you go down too far, don't really worry about that because that epoxy putty will build it right back up. Really what you're doing here is trying to do some leveling and identify the low spots. Now I go up to maybe about here. The front of that boat's going to lift up out of the water, so there's no reason to blueprint that far up. So kind of maybe partially up to this first sponson here. Okay, this is probably enough to show you. Get in a little closer, but you can see that I've started to sand the spot here, but not here. So the spot that is not sanded is the low spot. All right. So I'm going to keep sanding until this low spot is gone, and that's when I'm going to stop. That's how I know I'm flat. Up here, here's a high spot because it's sanded down. Over here, it's sanded, and again, this entire area right here is low. The sandpaper has not touched it, so I'm going to keep sanding until that's just gone. Up here again, you can see the edges are high and this middle part is low. So that's this concave problem that I'm talking about, and that's why the boat bounces. So I'm just going to continue to sand until I've hit and knocked off all the low, or I've got the high spots all knocked down. And so I don't see any low spots. As soon as I see those low spots go away, as soon as I start to touch those with the paper, I'm done sanding. Still low here. This one's very low.